Frankfurt, 6:12 a.m. A man walks out of a mid-range hotel near the Hauptbahnhof. He paid cash. He used a name that doesn't appear in any database that matters. He's been moving every 3 days. Vienna, then Prague, then here. New SIM card every stop. No credit cards. No loyalty programs. He thinks he's invisible. He ordered room service last night. Paid cash. But the delivery came 12 minutes after he called. He didn't think about the 12 minutes. He should have. Someone logged that call. Not the hotel. Not the delivery service. Someone else. Someone who has been building a picture of this man for 11 days. Not from what he does, but from the shape of what he doesn't do. The gaps. The silences. The patterns inside the randomness. The trail isn't cold. It was never cold. He just can't see the people reading it. So, if Mossad quietly puts you on their target list, how long could you actually survive? Let's find out. Before we go any further, something needs to be said clearly. This video doesn't glorify what intelligence agencies do. It examines how they actually think, and what happens when that thinking is aimed at you. That's a different thing, and it matters. Now, let's build this from the ground up. Mossad is not the CIA. It's not MI6. It is a service with roughly 7,000 personnel, smaller than most people expect, operating in a world where Israel has fewer allies, fewer diplomatic safe harbors, and fewer margins for error than any other country running a comparable intelligence program. That constraint doesn't make Mossad cautious, it makes it precise. When resources are limited and the cost of failure is existential, you don't get sloppy, you get surgical. The Institute, that's what they call it internally, has been running targeted operations outside Israel's borders since the early 1950s. Not occasionally, continuously. The doctrine they've built over 7 decades is not theoretical. It has been tested, revised, failed, rebuilt, and refined through actual operations in actual cities against actual people who were trying very hard not to be found. They found them anyway. Most of the time. Here's what that looks like in practice. In 1972, after the Munich massacre, Prime Minister Golda Meir authorized what became known as Operation Wrath of God. The objective was to locate and kill every individual who had planned or enabled the attack. The operation ran for 20 years, not 20 weeks, 20 years. Operatives tracked targets across Europe, Lebanon, and beyond. Some targets moved constantly. Some changed identities. Some were protected by foreign intelligence services. It didn't matter. The operation was patient in a way that most people cannot comprehend. If Mossad decides you are the target, the clock doesn't stop. It doesn't slow down. It runs until the objective is complete, or until a political decision is made at the highest level to stand down. Those decisions are rare. In 2010, in Dubai, Mossad assassinated Hamas weapons commander Mahmoud al-Mabhouh in his hotel room. He was security conscious. He was experienced. He traveled under an alias. He varied his routes. He was dead within hours of landing. The operation involved 26 operatives using at least 10 different nationalities of forged passports, coordinated across multiple hotels, multiple entry points, with real-time surveillance coverage across the entirety of his movements from the moment he touched down. He never saw it coming because there was nothing to see. The team was invisible, not because they were hiding, but because they looked like everyone else. Tourists, business travelers, a couple checking in, a man reading a newspaper. The city itself became the apparatus. In 1986, Mossad located Mordecai Vanunu, an Israeli nuclear technician who had leaked classified information about Israel's nuclear program to a British newspaper in Rome. They didn't grab him in Rome, they moved him. A female operative named Cheryl Bentov posed as an American tourist, built a brief romantic connection, and persuaded Vanunu to travel to Rome with her under the pretense of visiting her sister in Italy. He was sedated on a yacht, transported to Israel, tried in a closed courtroom, and sentenced to 18 years in prison. He never left voluntarily. He was maneuvered. The entire operation turned on one person's willingness to spend 10 days building trust with a man who thought he was invisible. These are not aberrations. These are the doctrine. Patient, multi-vector, invisible, designed not to overwhelm the target, but to close every exit before he knows the doors are shutting. So when we ask how long you could survive, we are asking a precise operational question, not a philosophical one. We need to define what survival means, who you are, and what triggered this. Here is the scenario. You are an American citizen, 38 years old. You work in cybersecurity consulting. Over the past 2 years, you have done contract work, legitimate on paper, borderline in practice, for clients that include a foreign state actor whose interests are directly opposed to Israeli national security. You haven't sold weapons. You haven't passed military intelligence. But you have built technical infrastructure that has been used to surveil Israeli diplomatic personnel. You know what you did. You told yourself it was just code. It was never just code. You don't know that Mossad is aware of you. But 6 weeks ago, your name appeared in an intercept. Not your name explicitly. A descriptor, an account linked to your work, a code name used by your client that, after 2 weeks of cross-referencing by an analyst in Tel Aviv, resolved to you. Your real name, your real passport, your real face. You are now in the system. You have no idea. The clock started 6 weeks ago. You don't know it's running. This is the first and most important thing to understand about surviving a Mossad hunt. The most dangerous phase is the one you don't know is happening. By the time you feel watched, the intelligence picture may already be complete. The operation may already be in planning. The surveillance may already be over because they don't need to watch you anymore. They already know where you are. Let's talk about time. This is where the reality gets uncomfortable. From the moment your name resolves in their system, Mossad typically runs what they call a target development cycle. The length varies, days, weeks, months, depending on priority, available assets, and political authorization. For a target in the United States, the cycle is complicated. Mossad does not have a free hand in America. The relationship with the CIA and FBI is the most sensitive bilateral intelligence relationship Israel manages. Operating on American soil without notification, surveilling an American citizen, running an active collection operation, and certainly any kinetic action, carries consequences that go to the highest levels of government. Israel knows this. They are careful in America. Careful does not mean absent. In your case, an American civilian whose activity was harmful but not military on American soil, a full kinetic operation is unlikely. That's not the threat model. The threat model is something quieter. Exposure, prosecution, neutralization through legal channels, or a conversation. The kind that ends with you understanding very clearly that you should never do this kind of work again, and that people know who you are and what you've done. But you don't know what the threat model is. That's the problem. So, you have, at the moment your name resolves, somewhere between 30 and 90 days before the operation against you moves from intelligence collection to active phase. The window is not precise. It depends on factors entirely outside your control: Israeli domestic politics, competing operational priorities, the attitude of the current Mossad director, whether the Prime Minister's office considers you significant enough to spend assets on. One factor could compress that window to 72 hours. If a senior official decides you represent an ongoing threat, not historical but active, right now, the timeline accelerates dramatically. They had 72 hours before you completed the next deliverable for your client. It was Monday evening. The briefing to the operations division happened Tuesday morning. So, what does Phase 1 actually look like? The intelligence collection on you has already been running for 6 weeks when we arrive at our scenario. Here is what they know. They know your name. They know your address, which was not difficult. It's in multiple databases accessible without any operational effort at all. They know your professional history, your published work, your conference appearances. They know your client list, insofar as it's visible. They know the accounts you use, the platforms you're on, the professional networks you belong to. This is open source intelligence, OSINT, and it takes an experienced analyst perhaps 4 hours to compile it. You are not a trained intelligence operative. You did not build a cover identity. You exist fully in the digital world, the way most people do. And that means there is a map of you that anyone with analytical skill can read. But OSINT is just the surface. What comes next is SIGINT, signals intelligence. And this is where the architecture of modern surveillance becomes relevant. Mossad has extensive technical capabilities, more relevant to your situation. Unit 8200, the Israeli Signals Intelligence Unit, has been described by former NSA officials as one of the most sophisticated signals intelligence organizations in the world relative to its size. They have collection relationships, technical partnerships, and capabilities that operate across the digital infrastructure you use every day. Your phone, your email, your encrypted messaging apps. None of these are as opaque as you think they are, not to a service with this level of technical investment. Within the first 2 weeks of the target development cycle, the signals picture on you is substantial. They know who you communicate with. They know the rhythm of your work. When you're active, when you go quiet, what that means. They've mapped your movement patterns from cell tower data. They know that you visit the same coffee shop on Tuesday and Thursday mornings. They know that you travel to 3 cities regularly for work. They know that your communication with your primary client follows a pattern: quiet for 2 weeks, then a burst of activity, then delivery, then payment. They also find something they didn't expect. You have a secondary contact, someone you communicate with less frequently through a separate account with noticeably more careful operational security than you use for everything else. A different app, shorter messages, less identifiable language. You're not professionally trained, but you've clearly been told to be careful about this one. That contact becomes a secondary target, a thread they will pull in parallel. This is what analysts call a network expansion. You came in as a single node. You are now a node in a graph, and the graph is growing. Human intelligence, runs alongside the signals work. This is the part that feels like fiction, but isn't. Mossad has a category of operative called a katsa, a case officer, and a much larger network of what they call sayanim. The word means helpers. These are diaspora Jews, and sometimes non-Jews, in cities around the world who provide assistance without necessarily being formal agents. Logistical help, access, local knowledge, the use of an apartment, a car rental under a clean name, a professional connection that can be leveraged to get someone into a room. In your city, or in a city you travel to frequently, there may be someone in your professional network whose connection to Israeli intelligence you would never suspect. This person does not approach you directly. They watch, they report, they confirm things the signals picture suggests, but cannot prove. 3 weeks into the target development cycle, the intelligence picture is considered sufficient to take to operational planning. Your pattern of life is mapped. Your vulnerabilities are identified. Your next travel date is known. The secondary contact has been partially identified. The authorization process begins. And this is where the institutional pressure becomes the most interesting part of the story. The authorization chain for an operation of this nature runs through the head of the relevant division, through the Mossad director's office, and depending on the nature of the planned action, to the Prime Minister. Israel's basic law requires prime ministerial authorization for targeted killing operations. For operations involving non-lethal outcomes, surveillance, approach, recruitment, or pressure, the authorization chain is shorter but still institutionally serious. Careers are on the line. Diplomatic relationships are on the line. The possibility of exposure in an allied country, the United States, is the kind of thing that gets discussed not just in intelligence terms, but in foreign policy terms. The Mossad director, in this scenario, has two concerns. The first is operational. Is the intelligence picture clean enough? Are the operational parameters tight enough? What is the exposure risk? The second is political. What does the Prime Minister's office want? Are they interested in prosecution? In recruitment, turning you into an asset? In simple neutralization, ending your usefulness to your client without any direct action against you at all? These decisions happen in rooms you will never see, and the decision reached in those rooms determines what the next 30 days of your life look like, even though you don't know you're in anyone's crosshairs. At this point in the operation, Mossad has three options. Each carried a different kind of risk. Option 1, pass the intelligence package to the FBI. Let American law enforcement handle it. Clean, diplomatically safe. The relationship with the Bureau is maintained. The risk is that American legal proceedings are slow, public, and uncertain. The secondary contact, the thread they want to pull, disappears the moment you're arrested, because everyone in that network goes dark. Option 2. Approach you directly. Not as Mossad. As someone else. A business contact. A recruiter. Someone who wants to hire you for a sensitive project. Get close. Assess whether you're a true believer or someone who wandered into something you didn't fully understand. If the latter, and the analysts think the latter is more likely, the possibility of turning you exists. You become an asset rather than a liability. Option 3, the one they actually chose. Option 3 is a coordinated pressure operation, separate from any official action, designed to make your current work impossible to continue without tipping you off in a way that lets you disappear. They will approach your client, not you. Indirectly, through channels your client will recognize but can't prove. They will make clear that a specific contractor in their network has been identified. The client will cut you off. Your contract will end. The technical infrastructure you built will be quietly decommissioned or abandoned. You will lose the relationship without ever knowing why. Meanwhile, and this is the part that runs in parallel, a legal package is being prepared and held, not filed, held. Ready to be filed if you resurface in this space, if you take another contract from a similar client, or if the secondary contact leads somewhere significant enough to justify the exposure of bringing it into the American legal system. You are being managed, not hunted, managed, and you will never know it happened. So let's return to the central question. How long could you actually survive? The honest answer depends entirely on one variable: what Mossad decides to do with you. If you are a low to medium priority target, a contractor who did something harmful but isn't actively running an ongoing program, the operation against you looks like option 3. It's quiet, it's effective, it doesn't require your death, your arrest, or even your awareness. You lose a client. You lose a revenue stream. If you try to find out why, you find nothing. If you attempt to re-enter that space, you find doors closed. You don't know why. You might have guesses. You will never have proof. In this scenario, you survive indefinitely, in the physical sense, because physical survival was never the objective. The objective was neutralization, and neutralization was achieved in approximately 60 days from the moment your name resolved in their system. If you are a higher priority target, if the infrastructure you built is actively operational, If the secondary contact leads somewhere significant, if a decision is made at the Prime Minister level that the threat is ongoing and serious, the scenario changes, the timeline compresses, the options change, the outcome changes. And here is the uncomfortable part of the honest answer. You would not know which scenario you were in. You would have no way of knowing. The quiet operation and the serious operation look identical from the outside, right up until the moment they don't. The people who have tried to survive Mossad by running, by going dark, by building new identities, by hiding, have generally failed for one of three reasons. The first is digital exhaust. Every device you touch, every network you connect to, every account you create leaves traces. The discipline required to go completely dark, genuinely dark, no exceptions, is not the discipline of a civilian. It requires training, resources, and a level of consistent paranoia that most people cannot maintain for more than a few weeks. You will make one mistake. You will use an old email address once. You will call someone from your old life from a clean phone, and that phone is now associated with that person's known contact list, and you are in the graph again. The second reason is pattern recognition. Human beings are creatures of habit at a depth that we don't consciously access. You will return to a neighborhood that feels comfortable. You will buy the same brands. You will visit the same type of coffee shop at the same time of morning. You will find a routine because routines are how human beings manage uncertainty. And an analyst who is looking for patterns in the behavior of someone who is trying not to have patterns, that analyst is very good at finding them. The third reason is the network. You cannot disappear alone if you have people, family, friends, former colleagues. Any of them can become an access point, not because they betray you, because they exist, because they use your old name in a phone call, because someone asks about you and they answer, because the people who love you are not trained in operational security and will never be. The people who have successfully evaded for extended periods, and there are very few and almost none from a Western civilian background, have done so by sacrificing everything. Not metaphorically, everything. Identity, network, geography, routine, the ability to exist in the digital world at all. They become ghosts. Most people are not capable of becoming ghosts. Most people don't want to be ghosts. Most people would rather take their chances, and Mossad, frankly, counts on that. There is one more thing that deserves to be said clearly, because it's the part that most content in this space gets wrong. Mossad is not omnipotent. It makes mistakes. It has made catastrophic mistakes. In 1997, a Mossad team attempted to assassinate Hamas political leader Khalid Mashal in Amman, Jordan. They injected him with a slow-acting poison in a public street. They were caught before they could leave the country. The operatives were arrested. King Hussein of Jordan, an ally of Israel, threatened to try them publicly and sever diplomatic relations unless Israel provided the antidote. Prime Minister Netanyahu had to personally call King Hussein and authorize the release of Hamas founder Sheikh Ahmed Yassin from Israeli prison in exchange for the antidote and the release of the arrested operatives. It was a complete operational failure. It damaged a critical bilateral relationship. It was authorized at the highest level, and it fell apart in a public street in Amman because a target's bodyguard noticed something was wrong. In the same Operation Wrath of God we discussed earlier, a Mossad team in Lillehammer, Norway, in 1973, killed a Moroccan waiter named Ahmed Bouchiki. They had the wrong man. He had no connection to Munich. 6 operatives were arrested by Norwegian police. It was the worst intelligence failure in the operation's history. It ended careers. It damaged Israel's relationship with Norway for years. And it happened because the intelligence picture was wrong. The point is not that Mossad fails often. It doesn't. The point is that the myth of infallibility is itself a weapon. Because if you believe they cannot fail, You stop looking for the seams. You stop asking what the constraints are. You stop thinking like an analyst and start thinking like a civilian who's already defeated. The seams exist. The constraints are real. Mossad operates in a world of limited resources, political authorization requirements, diplomatic risk, and human error. If you are in the scenario we described, a civilian contractor on American soil, those constraints are significant. Operating against an American citizen in America without American knowledge is a serious diplomatic risk. It gets managed. It gets debated. It creates friction that slows the timeline. That friction is time, and time is the only resource a target actually has. The question is what you do with it. And the answer, the honest answer, based on everything we've walked through, is that most people don't do anything with it because they don't know the clock is running until it's nearly over. So, how long could you actually survive if Mossad secretly marks you as a target? If the operation is quiet and managerial, and for most civilian targets in allied countries, it is, you survive indefinitely without ever knowing it happened. You just lose opportunities you can't explain. Doors close. Contracts end. The professional space you occupied quietly becomes unavailable to you. Survival, in this scenario, is total. But so is the control being exercised over you. You are free. You are also managed. The distinction between those two things is smaller than it looks. If the operation escalates, if you are genuinely high priority, if you refuse to be passively neutralized, if you resurface in a space that Mossad considers an active threat, the timeline compresses. Not to days, in most cases, for a civilian in a Western country, but to weeks. And in those weeks, the intelligence picture on you is not static. It is growing. Every move you make adds data. Every precaution you take tells them something about your awareness level. Every contact you reach out to adds a node to the graph. 30 days is not a wall. It's an average. The average assumes you are doing nothing to protect yourself because you don't know you need to. The moment you know, the moment you start taking precautions, the average breaks. Some targets have extended it by moving fast and leaving no pattern. Some have compressed it by running in predictable directions. The variable is you, your discipline, your willingness to sacrifice comfort for opacity, your ability to maintain that discipline for weeks without confirmation that it's working, without knowing if anyone is even looking. That last part is the hardest part, not the discipline, the uncertainty. Most people cannot function under sustained uncertainty without seeking confirmation. They reach out, they check, they test the perimeter. And the perimeter, if there is one, is exactly what Mossad is watching for you to test. Former Mossad director Meir Dagan said once that the most important quality in an intelligence operative is the ability to sit with ambiguity, to act on incomplete information without the need for resolution. That quality, he said, is rarer than any technical skill. He was talking about his own people. He was also describing exactly what you would need to survive against them. One question stays open at the end of all of this. We've talked about the operation, the doctrine, the precedents, the constraints, the timeline. We've walked through what Mossad can do and what it actually does, and how the gap between those two things is where survival lives. But here is the question that doesn't resolve easily. The question that the operation itself raises, not about survival, but about architecture. If a service can quietly neutralize a civilian, close doors, end contracts, manage behavior, reshape the professional landscape around a person without their knowledge or consent, without any legal proceeding, without any public accountability, without any of the mechanisms democratic societies built to constrain state power, if that is possible, and demonstrably it is, then the question is not whether you could survive it. The question is, who else is being managed right now in exactly this way without knowing it? And how would you know if it was you?